quite a few people here live with us, and we're really excited for you to be able to join us. So, hello, welcome to episode 18 of the DevOps Huddle. And this is a special 3-part series, the first being measuring GitHub Copilot. And we're going to go into what the other 2 parts will be in a bit, but so thankful that you could join us for our Unified Insights series. I'm going to introduce my panelists today. But first, I'd like to shout out to Aditi, who is also with us on the call, who'll be monitoring the chat. And so if you have any questions, she's the friendly face behind the chat function. But I'd like to introduce my panelists today. That is Ed and Saurabh. Ed, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Anna. I'm Ed Slatt. I'm a sales engineer here at Opsera. I spent most of my career as a developer, and then I moved into the DevOps platform space about 5 years ago. So happy to talk about Copilot today.
Great. And then Saurabh?
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? This is Saurabh. I am the solutions engineer / architect here at Opsera, and I have around 20 years of experience in software engineering field.
Awesome.
We're back to you.
Great, thanks. And I'm Anna Doherty. I'm the director of product marketing here at Opsera, and just really moderating today's panel and giving you some good insight into what's going to happen in future DevOps huddles. But so thankful you could join us. So we're going to start with just a little bit of introduction about what's going to happen in the call today, and then we're going to go into a few upcoming Unified Insights sessions, and then we're going to hit the ground running. So what you'll see today is an introduction into, why we're having this DevOps huddle, why it's going to be important for your business. Obviously, you have joined us because you may be having GitHub Copilot challenges, or maybe you haven't even started to implement it yet. So we wanted to go through some reasoning about why it's important to get started and what some of the challenges might be, and then how you can answer some of those challenges using the Unified Insights that Opsera provides. And then we'll take your audience questions at the end. So before we get started with the content, I just wanted to give you an insight into what's going to happen for part 2 and part 3 of the Unified Insights series. So you see a little QR code here for part 2, which will be June 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And that is about DORA. So today you're going to learn all about GitHub Copilot measurements, right? That's all your developer activities, those inner loop activities, like we like to say. Now you want to know, well, what's going to happen downstream? Right? What happens after we've implemented GitHub Copilot? Our developers are using it. How does it affect throughput, velocity, deployments? So part 2 will be a deep dive into DORA and how that's impacted by GitHub Copilot. And then part 3 hasn't been scheduled yet, but it will definitely be in August. And it will be about, July, and it will be about developer experience and security. So we will definitely reach out to you with the date once that is scheduled. But go ahead and sign up for part 2 DORA using that QR code right there. And we will also show it at the end of today's session. So you have a chance to sign up again after you found the value from today's DevOps Huddle. I also want to say at the end of today's session, you will get a special offer. So you probably want to hang around for that. We're offering 14-day free trial of GitHub Copilot dashboard. So you don't want to miss that. It's a pretty exciting offer. So we will show more information about that at the end of today's DevOps Huddle. So with that, I'm so excited to be able to hand it off to Saurabh, who will give us an introduction about GitHub Copilot and sort of the content you'll be seeing today.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome again, everyone. So I have been using GitHub Copilot for a while, and I've been using, I love my Java language programming, and I write code, and I ask for prompts on my Visual Studio and IDE, getting all the data and code for just writing through, and it helps me with productivity and velocity and the quality as well to test those classes, see those import classes, and then work on them. Ed, have you seen the similar pattern, or what is your experience on GitHub Copilot?
Yeah, thank you, Saurabh. Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here. I'll talk a little bit about some of my first experiences. So I'm going to, here we go. Okay, yeah, Saurabh, thank you for that. Absolutely. I started using Copilot recently, and I had a kind of a neat experience, and I think it's telling, especially to folks who are rolling Copilot out to more senior developers. So I want to kind of walk through my experience to kind of set the stage for the discussion about how to measure Copilot, how to measure it, and why to measure it. So to start with, I had to build, or I wanted to build, I still do a lot of development, even though I'm a sales engineer, and I wanted to build a Chrome extension to try to pitch some of my features to Opsera. So I never built a Chrome extension, and I thought this is a great opportunity to use both Chrome extensions and Copilot. So, I did a little bit of training and snooping around. I got Copilot set up in my IDE, VS Code, and I started right away with this prompt, a loop. I wanted a loop that would show the URLs of all the tabs open in a browser. So I put up the prompt. Copilot does its thing, and it comes back with a couple of lines of suggested code, and they were great. I accepted them, and that's what we're looking at right here. This loop is what came back, and it said, here's how you do it. You know, I said what I wanted. It came back. I think this will be useful. I accepted it, and I ran it. So the first time I ran it, I had a couple tabs open in Chrome, and sure enough, it didn't work, right? So yes, I got my alert to come up, and it came up once per tab open, so that's good. The base structure of the suggested code was working, but the tab.url was coming up as undefined. So here's my opportunity. Now I'm gonna flex Copilot and let it help me. So I learned when I was enabling that I could use this question answer notation right in my code that I was working on. So I wrote question, how do I get to the URL of the tab? And it came back pretty quickly. It came back and said tab.url. Right. So this is one of my first interactions, which was kind of disappointing. Right. I know that I just tried it. It's coming undefined. It's 2 lines up. This was one of my initial interactions, and it left me a little bit down. But I'm going to keep at it. I also learned at this point how it's kind of interacting, the cadence that's involved. I'm typing and it's thinking of things that might be useful, and it's putting them in front of me. So I was kind of surprised. It actually recommended my next question, which wasn't right. So I wrote over it question, but it's coming up as undefined, right? So I'm learning how the thing works. It's producing results. It's coming up undefined. What now? So it comes back with console.log tab and see what's in there, which I thought was brilliant. This is exactly what I had hoped for when I turned on Copilot. This is the kind of thing, if I had a developer next to me, this is what they would say to me, right? Or if somebody asked me this question, Ed, it's coming up undefined, what should I do? Console it, check it out, see what's in there, make sure you have your context squared away, all that kind of thing. So I thought this was great. And but I had never used Chrome extensions before. I inspect in Chrome all the time, but I didn't know how to get the console log up immediately. And this is kind of a trivial thing, but this is one of those opportunities for Copilot to help me. This is also, I want to kind of broach this idea of gumption. As a developer, I have a budget, a gumption budget for the day. I'm going to be able to figure out this many things today, and after that, my tank is going to be empty and it's going to get painful, right? So here's an opportunity. I don't want to spend any of my gumption figuring out how to turn on the console. I mean, that makes no sense at all. I don't want to Google it. I don't want to right click on everything I see in Chrome. I just want to say right there in my IDE, well, how do I do that? And it came back instantly and said, right click here, inspect that, and it worked. And it was another fantastic interaction. So I did that again. Copilot is recommending all these lines, and it recommended another question, which wasn't what I wanted. So I replaced it. I looked in there. I console.log that object. It wasn't in there. So I wrote, I'm seeing stuff, but no URL. And then it came back with tab.url, which is another, less than great experience, right? This is 5 lines above that. I already tried that. It didn't work, so I was a little disappointed by that, but I thought the next predicted question was fantastic. It predicted my question of, but it's not working, which I thought was hilarious. So I wanted to kind of explain this experience because everybody's hearing about Copilot. People are using it. It's immensely powerful. There are so many great things and so many observations to make about the tool, but there are opportunities for frustration, and frustration dampens adoption. So that gets into why do we want to measure Copilot? How do we measure Copilot? It's all about making informed decisions. If I'm tasked, I have 100 developers and I'm tasked with rolling out Copilot. I want to know who to give access to, what kind of enablement there would be, what kind or would need, and what kind of arguments and pitches I should make to get them involved. So to do that, we want to measure it to make informed decisions. That's why we want to measure it. Now, how do we measure it? Each one of these interactions is kind of like a back and forth with Copilot, right? So as I'm typing, it's taking and sending back on my behalf the context of information that it might need to say something useful to me. So each one of these is kind of this round robin. It also knows who I am, what language I'm in, what IDE I'm in. All of that information is being specified to Copilot. It's using that to come back with something. It's also logging that. It can also see whether or not I liked what it recommended. So it's keeping all of that information, and that's great. That's very useful information, but it's not everything that we want, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, what it's giving and how it can be supplemented to really make good decisions. So I'll pause there for a second. Saurabh, can you tell us about Copilot and how it starts to fit in Opsera?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. It was really interesting to see your experience here about Copilot and how you started using it. And I have seen, I was actually reading a report on GitHub Copilot with the surveys. It actually says that a lot of correspondents said that it's extremely easy to use and it's extremely useful, the code that is provided. So I see a similar pattern with you as well, that you're going back and forth with those questions and finally achieving the task that you wanted in a very quick and fast fashion. And I've also seen like around 1 million developers have adopted Copilot, with around 50,000 organizations actually using it. And an interesting data point I've seen is that with Copilot, it will add around 1.5 trillion to the global economy and around 45 million developers in the next 5 years, which is a very interesting data. And we should look into it as like how to use it as developers. It's really good to enjoy that part of using GitHub Copilot with good code quality. Also seeing that the users and developers are using around 5 days per week, around an average of 3.4 days per week, which is really interesting to see, and boosting an overall developer experience and satisfaction. So having said that, knowing that the landscape is growing, what are the challenges? Like, is there an ROI? So 50% of companies have started using it. What is the turning point on the Copilot usage? How effective it is? What is the adoption rate? Can we understand the productivity, velocity, agility of the project? How can we measure all that and have some data points for our engineers, for our managers, and to go and visualize all these KPIs? And then also the developer experience. So summing it all, we need all those data points to look into to get to the next level of understanding and using the management part of it. So what I'm going to do is, there are some basic KPIs and APIs that can understand GitHub Copilot usage, but Opsera has created a very well-defined dashboard, and allow me to share in a second here, where we will cover mostly GitHub Copilot, but I want to share that with all these. Let me know if you can see my screen really quickly. I guess you can see. Thank you. So Opsera has developed a very versatile and intensive dashboard where we cover, this is, by the way, our dashboard on Opsera. We are on the homepage of dashboard. And what we have is, with DORA, we can have the whole KPIs of velocity, productivity, measuring the agility and throughput of the project. We have application security, posture. You can have a full dashboard for that. And then developer experience dashboard. You can even measure the sprint velocity, and then have full reports created for each KPI. We have around 100 tools that we can integrate with, and you can develop reports for that. And then there is GitHub Copilot. And for today's session, we will cover GitHub Copilot, and in the next 2 webinars following, we will cover all the other aspects of it and tying all this data together so that you can have an informed decision when you're going into a Scrum meeting, or you are in a meeting where you want to understand how quickly you can deploy. So allow me to go to the GitHub Copilot dashboard here. And what you see is basically getting the whole report from the GitHub Insights and GitHub tool registry that we have hooked up into, and getting the data from the telemetry of that. What you see here is at layer 1, you see the developer usage, you see the Copilot pulse, you see the date range for last 3 months, and then overall all organizations. We can even have organization based or project based for for your company. And then from here, you can see the developer adoption rate, where we can see the active users, the IDE users, and active chat users, how they're getting code and how they're adopting the code that was recommended to them. Then we also have around acceptance rate, which is very interesting to see, and get into how much of the suggestions that were given were adopted. And then the quality of suggestions, which is really interesting that it's so high and which is really good for developers to use it. And then I also want to break down into the usage of the graph of which language was suggested, like here JavaScript around 27%, then Java, React, and everything. So we have a full breakdown of how you can see data, what were the suggestions and what were the languages and what was accepted from there. Also, we have a breakdown with editors from Visual Code, JetBrains, and so many others. That gives us a good idea on the breakdown. Then I would also go to Copilot Pulse. Before that, anything, Ed, you have any questions so far?
No, yeah, if I could just add here, Saurabh, the way that I interpret this dashboard, right? So I'm going to use an analogy here to a car dashboard, and I'm going to beat it to death, so bear with me. But when I look at this, I see on the top left, developer adoption. This is coming in with how many. I gave access to a certain number of developers, and a certain number of them are actually using it. So to me, this is kind of a tachometer, right? So this isn't going to make my company do better at software delivery, just seeing this start to turn green, right? There's going to be, hopefully down the line, there are going to be effects that get that done, but this is not a measure of the speed of the company for sure, right? You can equate this to a tachometer, RPM. This is the engine revolving. In the bottom here is where you actually see the speedometer. This is how fast your organization is going. You know, how fast are your pull requests being accepted? How often are your commits hitting the server? These are things that you're going to care about that relate directly to software delivery, and you want to see these improve as time goes on. So kind of like with the car, you know, just because the engine's turning doesn't mean you're going down the road. But if you want to go down the road, you want the engine to be turning. Up here, one more point here on the top right, these acceptance rate and quality of suggestions, I kind of consider this similar to the cooling and the oil temperatures, right? These are kind of indicative of the capability of Copilot, of the model, and they're characteristics of that piece that's coming out of GitHub. But really, and you expect it to improve over time as the model gets better. We know it will. These things are going to be green. They're going to turn more green. But there again, they are not getting things shipped for us. You know, it's kind of like a health indicator. Everything is working okay. With one exception here, for acceptance rate, you would be able to expect that as your folks get more enabled in Copilot, they can better prompt and better provide that context so that Copilot provides better suggestions. And in that way, you know, you kind of can influence as enablement increases, you can expect your organization to be able to improve that a little bit, but otherwise, they're really the health of the model.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, sir.
And that's really interesting point. And I actually wanted to emphasize on how many code of lines were generated from Copilot, right? So that gives an intensive overview of that. And then what was accepted as a graph, you can see that that's the Copilot impact that we're getting on a daily basis in an organization. Total number of commits. Look at this, around 10,000 commits that were taken. That shows the quality of suggestion as well. And then the pull request accepted is another way to see like how much was merged into my main branch. This is interesting to see the functionalities that went in, and developers are very well managing the whole data and accepting the code there. So this is a very interesting way to see at the overall Copilot impact to look into, and this will further develop us into the velocity and productivity for the KPIs as we go forward in this seminar in next series. Now coming back on a part of it is Copilot Pulse, which is a really interesting and good way to see at the business value of understanding Copilot and why should you use. I mean, I'm a proponent for it, and you should be as well in your organization. This is dependent on the industry research that happened, and we are taking that from that data that around, you have around 2,000 developers, and let's say 50% of the developers are accepting it. So around 1,000 developers accepted, you will get around 25% savings on the whole development code and productivity measure of it. So you're saving around 7.5 million right there. The productivity gain is around 8% over it. And then this helps you further into planning. As you can see, the developers will continue to grow. So you can move the barometer here and continue to increase the number of developers. And you'll see that your ROI, your pulse, and you can save more. And so I would, at one point, like I was talking about 45 million developers going in next 5 years, this is where you can see the savings and productivity coming as high as we can go. And I love that graph where you can see the business value of coming from not from just writing code, but actually looking into business and getting money out of it for the good bang for your buck. And then similarly, at one point, right now we are saying 25% of saving, but this can also increase and go further. So I'll end there. And this is the calculator that is measuring all this behind it. And that's how it came through. So around 2,000 developers, an average salary, and total number of hours they work, number of Copilot users as they increase, and so on and so forth. So I am going to stop here. Any questions or anything that Anna, Aditi, Ed, you want to share here?
Yes, actually, we had a few questions that were coming through. Here's the first one. How can I understand the health of my project, and when will a deployment release happen?
Good question. And actually, this is tying it from right here from Copilot Impact, from commit to pull request to our KPIs, where I was talking about the dashboards, right? Really, and like DORA dashboard. So we talk about deployment frequency. We talk about lead time for change failure rate. And all these coming together will bring you the productivity, the health of your project, how quickly you can deploy, what are the issues you had if you had deployed, like even if a pull request was taken from feature branch to main branch, is there any issues there, or it went very smooth? The deployment frequency could be from 8 days to 10 days, depending on your sprint cycle, or 2 weeks. So all that ties together here with DORA dashboards and the KPIs.
Okay, here's another one. I'm rolling out Copilot for about 100 developers, and there is some pushback. Do you have any advice on how to convince developers to give this a shot?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Saurabh. I love this question, and I have an opinion about it. So to me, if I have my developer hat on, this is a quality of life issue, right? I don't tell me about how it's going to make me faster for the organization and all that stuff, but tell me about how I'm going to enjoy my job more. And I totally believe that, having used it, having been a developer. So just like if you're a construction worker, if you have a worker that's helping you all of a sudden, you can give it the stuff you don't want to do. It can go dig the holes, and it can go all do the stuff that's painful, and then you can save the fun work for yourself. So that's kind of how I view that, and that's how I use Copilot. It gets back to that gumption budget. At the end of the day, I have more left in the tank, and that's how I would probably try to push it out.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. For example, have you used Stack Overflow before, right? So, or you're researching some code that you really want, and you're researching which library to use. There is a fair amount of research goes into writing that code. What library, is it good? Is there a vulnerability around it? And all these aspects of it, right? So you will go from Stack Overflow to 10 other different kind of websites to just research and get that code. While with Copilot, you can get that framework right there. You can get that code and then enhance your productivity right there.
Nice. I see pull requests accepted and commits. Are there other metrics related to overall software delivery health?
Yes, I'll start with this one, Saurabh. Absolutely, there is, and really the easiest answer here is DORA, right? DORA is Google's research into high performing technology teams. They took a lot of time to figure out how to judge software delivery, the health of software delivery, and it boils down to 4 main KPIs. So I love that question. We are definitely going to dig all the way into that on our next huddle.
Okay, great. And this last one, we have a security question. Do you have dashboards to understand security vulnerabilities?
Yes, good question, and which is I understand where it's coming from. It's a very important question, and security comes up as a very important aspect when you're writing code. And we do have security dashboards, and I actually give you a sneak peek, but we'll cover in detail about this. So we can have all the scores. We can give you criticality according to the NIST database. We run through that database on a constant basis, and then you can understand high, medium, low. And furthermore, you can do security scans and you can do container scans as well. And we'll cover in depth about this in the next webinar. So stay tuned. Any other questions?
That's all I've seen. Is there anything else? Definitely feel free to drop it in the Q&A in our Zoom, or you can also drop it in the chat over here.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aditi, for monitoring the chat and getting everyone's questions in. And then thank you, Saurabh and Ed, for answering them in such a fun and friendly manner. I love all the analogies. I'm going to take over the screen again real quick here. And like I said at the top of the hour, what you saw was a dashboard called the GitHub Copilot's metrics dashboard in Opsera Unified Insights. You have an opportunity to try that for free for 14 days. So this is brand new, fresh out of the oven. So definitely go ahead and scan that QR code. What you'll do is you'll bring your tools and we will implement this dashboard in an hour or less. So as fast as you can say, we watched a huddle, we can get this thing implemented for you. And so all the metrics that you saw that Saurabh demoed for us, commit, pull requests, code lines accepted over time, all those metrics will be available to you. You can see developer activity, usage and adoption, and then some of those Copilot pulse predictions that Saurabh showed off that can give you an understanding of if you have higher adoption, how much time savings can you get, and what does that start to look like in terms of ROI. So I think Aditi just added a link. Yes, thank you, Aditi. You also added a link in the chat for us in case you don't want to use a QR code. But we highly, highly recommend taking advantage of this because it's really exciting for us anyway, to be able to see this in action. So I'm going to leave this up for a few more minutes here, just to give people a chance to take advantage of this offer. Like we said, it's 14 days, free trial, really low risk. And we were really curious to see how people, start to measure GitHub Copilot as a result of the excitement in the space. So go ahead and download this QR code. We will also send it out to you after this call in an email, along with the recording. So in case you missed the offer today, you will absolutely be able to sign up for it later. Okay, and then, so thank you very much, everybody. I wanted to do just a quick recap here of everything. So today we learned a lot about the developer activities, right? How do you measure GitHub Copilot from the beginning, right? So those sort of developer loop, inner loop activities. I think it's really important for us to remember that that's only one critical component to how GitHub Copilot affects the rest of your downstream metrics, right? So Ed and Saurabh both mentioned on this call DORA, right? DevOps research and assessment, the core 4. How does that impact mean time to recovery, deployment frequency, rollback time? How long does it take you to actually fix a problem once it's been deployed? Hopefully you're not deploying code with problems using GitHub Copilot, but how can you tell, right? Are you able to connect the dots between what your team is using with GitHub Copilot and how it's impacting you downstream? That's all a crucial component of measuring GitHub Copilot effectiveness, not just from developer activity, but also downstream. And that's why we've put together this entire Unified Insight series. I'm going to flash back to the offer real quick because I think it's really important for us to mention here. I don't think we mentioned it when we were showing off this dashboard, but this is insight that's driven directly from GitHub. And so GitHub is sending us these insights from the API, and we're, taking advantage of early adoption of the GitHub Copilot API to develop this sort of first to market dashboard. You probably won't find this anywhere else, not in the way that it's displayed here. So when we say 14-day free trial, it's of something that is very, very hard to find and would be difficult for you to create yourself unless you got some really talented guys, some really talented developers just hanging around, waiting to develop some GitHub Copilot dashboard for you. And you still wouldn't probably get the breadth of information that we're able to offer here. So just wanted to bring that up here before we conclude this DevOps huddle. Yes, so like I said, today we really focused on sort of those inner loop adoption, usage metrics, understanding how GitHub Copilot is being used at your organization. And now for parts 2 and 3, we'll talk about those downstream impacts, right? How does it impact your throughput and your velocity? How does it impact your deployment frequency? How does it impact the code quality? So you'll definitely want to sign up for part 2, in which we do a deep dive into the Opsera Unified Insights DORA reporting that can connect the dots for you into those downstream metrics. This QR code is here, but it is on June 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And again, after this DevOps huddle, we will send you an invite to this part 2, so you don't have to worry about it. And then part 3, which will be focused on developer experience and the security question. Somebody had a question in chat. What happens? Can you measure security from this, new use of AI assisted code? Does it impact my security? We do have these answers for you in part 3. And we'll also be focused on developer experience. Like Ed said, Ed is a proponent of having better developer experience as a result of using GitHub Copilot. We'll be able to talk more in depth about how to actually measure that, right? Is it actually improving developers' lives? So that date will be determined. We will also invite you when we're able. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to bring this 3-part series to you. And if you would like to get the GitHub Copilot dashboard for free for 14 days, go ahead and sign up. We'll get it set up in an hour or less. If you bring your tools, we'll bring the talent, as we like to say. And thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate all your time, and we will see you in part 2. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Anna.